All right, let's go ahead and continue. So just a quick overview then again is we have the goal. That's how we start our story. So basically you have a story idea, find out the ending, come up with an ending right now and write it down in your notes. And our ending in this fantasy story that I'm creating on the fly, I have not pre-thought this out. I'm just thinking this up on the fly, so we'll see what ends up happening with this story. Is, as we already covered, is that Jack, the main character, is his sister was raped by Bob. That's he thinks it's Bob, and we'll just make it turn out to be Bob, or we can even add a twist to it that it turns out not to be Bob, or he gets sidetracked thinking it's someone else, and I can decide that in the beginning of the story. He thinks it's Bill, or he thinks it's Charlie, and then he finds out somewhere middle of the story that it's Bob, and then at the end. Anyway, so the end of the story though is he runs into Bob, the one who actually raped his sister, and he's about to kill him when he has a self-revelation. He realizes that killing Bob will change nothing. Getting revenge will not make him feel better. It will not make his sister feel better. It'll do him no good. So he decides not to do it. Okay, so that's the ending. I write that down in my notes. So I got the ending of my story. Now I know how to craft my story. Because I know the ending of my story, every scene will lead to that ending. Every scene I make will hint, the foreshadow will mold my character Jack to have that self-revelation. See, if I didn't know my ending, then I would write all these scenes, and I would fumble, and I would blah blah blah, and I would finally reach the end of my goal, and then I would look back at my story and go, wow, I didn't really foreshadow anything that happened. Because how can I foreshadow the theme, which is that revenge? So now I know my theme of the story, which is this under branch here, right? And you can call it whatever you want. Names don't matter, but I'm going to write theme now. I probably should have paused the video to do that, whatever. Just because it takes time to do all this. Okay, so I'm using Photoshop, by the way. Okay, so this is my theme. And my theme then, and this is the theme is like it's your under moral. It's the moral lesson that you're teaching in your story. And really, the reason why you should be writing is not just to give entertainment. The desire line, this thick line, that's the entertainment line. That's the entertainment value. That's the surface story. If you think about it like with, some old stories where the surface story is written in such a way that kids can understand it, and the kids think, oh, cool, little animals having fun and blah, 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 and whatever the story might be. But when adults read the same story, they catch the moral theme being taught. Not only do they catch the moral theme being taught, let's say they catch the sexual innuendos, the things that children won't pick up on because they're referring to a sexual organ as a snake and so forth. So you want the entertainment value to be there. You want the plot. That's what this line is actually called. You don't have to. I call it the spine. I call it the plot. It doesn't matter what you call it. The plot. This is your main story. The scenes that lead from the desire leads to the goal. And that should be entertaining in itself. It should be fun to read. But at the same time, you're writing all of that to hint at this understory, at the theme. And there's all kinds of under goodness you can have. You can have the theme, which is the moral lesson that you're teaching the readers without actually teaching them. You don't want to preach to them, because if you preach to them in the main story structure with dialogue and so forth, they're going to feel like they're being preached at. People don't want to be preached at. You want that. You want this to be under, something that they pick up on subconsciously, something that they see. But some people might not. Some people might just read your story and they'll never get the theme out of it. But it'll still be there for those readers that want to read deeply. And it's important to have that, because even if they don't realize it's there, it makes the story stronger whether they realize what the theme is or not. They'll be like, wow, this story is really good. It's just not your typical action flick. There's something different about this story. And so the theme that I have, obviously then, the moral lesson that I'm teaching, is that revenge will not make you feel better. Killing someone, get revenge on them, taking someone's life is not worth it, because it'll bring you more grief in the long run than it will even bring you in the short run. It'll never make you satisfied. Killing your rapist or your sister's rapist is not going to change anything. So that's the theme, that's the moral lesson that's going to be taught in my story. Right, so now I need, the next thing I need before we get into conflict then is my main character needs weaknesses, or he needs at least a weakness. And he needs to come to grips with that weakness. He doesn't necessarily need to overcome it. For instance, Indiana Jones' weakness was, well, one of his weaknesses was fear of snakes. And he has to, in every one of the stories that I recall, he has to come into conflict with snakes. He doesn't overcome his fear, but he overcomes it momentarily. For instance, in the last Indiana Jones story, there is a large, he's sinking in quicksand, and he has to grab onto a snake to be saved, because they couldn't find anything else. And so he needs to grab onto a snake. So he didn't overcome his fear of snakes. He still fears snakes, but he did face his fear for the moment. And so you might want to give your character a phobia or a fear and have them face it at some point in the story. But that's not really his weakness. The main character needs a moral flaw, something that makes him hurt other characters in the story. He doesn't have to hurt them in a real horrible way, but he needs to have some sort of flaw where he does hurt other characters, and something that he needs to work on, and he might not even be aware of it. But through his desire in reaching the goal, he will either see his flaw and start to work on it, or he'll actually conquer and change. Some characters change, some don't. You have to decide whether you want your character to change, but he still needs a weakness, at least one. And a well-rounded character will have more than one weakness. So let's go ahead and go through the weaknesses. So let's say we're going to have two different types of weaknesses here that we'll give our character. Weakness one will be something that affects the main character, and in this case Jack, in such a way that it's just affecting him and not others. So it's like a psychological weakness. Let's say we'll go totally cliche with this. He's developed a drug problem, pill popping. He's popping some type of pill, Valium, let's say. So this is his psychological weakness. After he, witnesses his sister being raped, he develops a addiction to Valium. So that is his psychological weakness. He's struggling with the rape of his sister, and he's not able to deal with it properly, and so he has turned to drugs. And so this is weakness number one. Okay, so he got his first weakness, drug addiction. Now the second weakness, and actually this weakness could affect people around him, because people will feel bad for Jack. They'll be like, Jack, you need to stop doing these drugs, man. We're starting to worry about you, and that can cause them suffering. So, and it can also cause him to treat others wrongly. So here's usually whatever weakness one is will lead to weakness two. It'll lead to his weakness that causes suffering to those around him. And that's something he wants to change in the story. It's something that you want to have him come to grips with in the story, and towards the end of the story he overcomes it and realizes that he's treating people wrong and decides he's not going to do it anymore. You can either show the change where he starts treating people differently, or you can have him realize it and give the readers hope that he's going to work on that and change it. So in this case, his second weakness then is the abuse, verbal abuse, and maybe even physical abuse sometimes, to other people because of his drug addiction, because of his pain and suffering. Right, so now we have his two weaknesses, and that is he has become a drug addict to Valium. This leads him to be an abusive person. He doesn't have to be bad, just, maybe he loses it sometimes, it gives him an anger issue. And we can even say then his second weakness is anger, which leads him to abuse. It really doesn't matter, so you can put anger there if you want. And so once in a while he's going through his pain and suffering, and he has a short fuse, and then he says something stupid to someone. And this is very realistic, because people do this all the time, right? Anger possesses them. And so he gets mad at people, and he'll tell them F you or whatever he tells them. He tells them bad things, and then he regrets it, and he knows he needs to change this. He doesn't like himself for it, and that leads him into his depressed state and more drug addiction. So these two are feeding off each other, and he can just spiral down